Maybe we'll do a second Mammar if the time allows. We're learning the Mammar. The first Mammar we've learned this before. Yigal Elon Tame, which is from the Zmiris. We sing it. We sing this on Shabbos afternoon or Shabbos lunch. It's from the Rizal. It's Asada L'Sudasa. So it says from the Rizal. It says it's part of the Zmiros. It says Yigal Elon Tame. You can reveal the reason of the B'seisar Name, the B'seisar Name to the 12 Chalas. Name is the Chalas. The Inun Oz B'Shmei, that they are a letter in the name of Hashem. Kfula Klusha, double. Both Kfula Klusha is a concept of double and extension. So he says like this. What does it mean, Yigal and Tam? You'll reveal the reason. This is connected, the Alter Rebbe says, this is connected to the idea of Maras HaMachpelah or Stay Machpelah, the field that has the doubles. What's the double? So he starts off explaining, he says, Yigal and Tam, you'll explain the reason of the 12 loaves of bread. The filling of the letter Hey, meaning every letter has other silent letters that are, the letters that are pronounced when you read the letter that are not in the writing of the letter. For instance, Yud. So Yud is when you write if you want to make the Yud, you just make a dot or a small Yud. But if you were to write the letter Yud in its full sound, it'd be Yud Vav Dalet. That's a Yud. So in the filling of a Hey could either be Hey Yud Yud or Hey Hey. So two Heys. So there's the filling, the milui of Hey is Hey Acheres, is another Hey. That means doubling. That's a concept of the double cave. Now it says in the name of Hashem, meaning the names of Yud Ke Vav Ke, which Yud Ke Vav Ke itself, the Yud, the Hey, and then of course the Vav, and then the next Hey. If you use the number value, Yud is 10, Hey is 5, is 15, Vav is 21 because it's 6. And then another Hey is makes it 26. So then Shem Havai is the number value of 26. If you were to spell out the letters in the way they are pronounced, which would be Yud Vav Dal would be 10. So then you have Hey Hey is another 10, so it's 20. And then you have 20, and then you have so you would have you have Hey Hey, and then you have another Hey Vav Aleph Vav, which is 13, and then you have Hey Hey. I think that's how you do Shem Ban, which is the number value of 52. But either way, so he says that it's the second Hey in the name of Hashem Yud Ke Vav Ke in Ban, in number value 52. But he's like this, V'inyan Yuven Behegdim Lahavin Inyan Ha'achila. In order to understand all this, what does this mean? What are we talking about? The double letters? What is the silent Hey? What is this all referring to? First, let's understand the concept of eating. So we're going to try to understand the concept of rectifying and elevating our engagement in worldly things. So he said like this: the idea of eating, when a person eats, then the food becomes part of the fats and the bloods. And in the blood is the soul, and the vitality, life of the man, of the person. That first, so to say, the liver receives the blood from the food, it gets processed over there, and from there it sends it to the heart, to lamayach, and to the brain. There's 3 rulers in the world, meaning to say in the person, which is kavda v'liba b'maycha. There's the liver, that is the filter, and there's the heart, and there's the brain, the 3 main organs of the human. And that's how one elevates the food. So by eating the food, that's all the physical, that the food becomes of vitality and energy. So it goes through the process, and it gives life to the person. So too, there's not just the physical life that comes through the food, there's also the spiritual life. When a person has the strength, right? So then you could strengthen your heart and your mind in service of Hashem. It's not that just that you should be strong, but you should have a service of Hashem. Should be liba. What does it mean in the person's heart? We have a passion in the heart for the passion, the fire for Hashem. That also comes from the eating. Had a person not eat, the person would be weak and wouldn't have the energy to have a passion for Hashem. Also, a person's brain, you could concentrate and contemplate in the greatness of Hashem. That's all the refining. The refining is using the energy. So here we're talking about using the energy as a source for elevation, so a person could do their avodah. That from the food, the person is a person. The person is a functioning person, it means to say. The person is not created from food. But the person's ability to function as a person and to not be tired and to have the energy and to be strong and to be focused comes from the person's ability to eat when a person eats food. And the person's eating of the food helps the person to serve Hashem. He says, however, so there's the struggle. The struggle is, what does it mean, the struggle? That you have to take the food. The food has in it, we're going to see it has psilis, and you have to elevate it to be able to find the energy, and that energy should be a positive energy in a person's service of Hashem. So he says, this is all the way things are in the week. But when a person is holding Shabbos, is then separating is forbidden. One of the things we don't do in Shabbos is separating. Why? Because food is not totally good. Food has in it both the positive and the negative component. And the idea is when a person eats it properly, you're separating and finding the good, the healthy part of the food. And that's like the part of the person that takes the energy, that digests the energy. And the parts that have to be pushed out get pushed out when a person goes to the restroom. But on Shabbos, it's a different type of eating. Bechinas hamshacha comes all from above. Like it says, the Shabbos einig, the whole point of Shabbos is in pleasure. Like it says, Hashem, you take pleasure in godliness. And therefore, the idea of Shabbos is that in the food itself, there's an elevation. The food itself is only good. There is no, like he's going to say soon, there's no perish. There's no separation on Shabbos. There's no discharge in Shabbos. I mean, not physically, but there's no discharge in a spiritual sense in the food of Shabbos. The actual eating the food itself is a mitzvah. Meaning to say, when we're in the week, so eating the food itself is not a mitzvah, because eating the food is an avoda. When you eat the food, you have to work on yourself to eat. First of all, eat properly, eat the right foods, kosher foods. That, of course, you have to on Shabbos as well. And make a bracha, of course, you have to do that on Shabbos as well. But then there's also the separating the mundane within the food itself and taking the positive of the energy. But there's no mitzvah in the food itself. The mitzvah is a byproduct that by eating the food, you have energy, and using the energy properly, then a person gets elevation. But on Shabbos, actually eating the food in itself is a mitzvah. Eating food on Shabbos itself is a mitzvah. So he explains like this. It says in Tillim, that there was the end and then the beginning was created, formed. The end, the last creation of the creation. If you look at the person, the way they are in the world and what is stronger, a person is stronger and the kelim and the food is lower. It means that the food itself, we look at food needs the person, so to say, not, I've said this before many times, different ways of looking at this, but there's from different places of perspective, meaning in theory, if you look at it in what's God's kavana, what was God's purpose in creation, that man is higher than food. After it came through the breaking of the vessels. So a person is kedem, person comes first. Because even though the food may not need the person to exist, doesn't mean no, we're not talking about the planting of the food. We're talking about a person needs to eat food, otherwise a person dies. And food on itself doesn't mean the growth of vegetation. If once it's there, it doesn't need the person is not giving it anything. The person could help it and plant it and water it, etc. In theory, it could do it on its own. However, that's all as far as the food goes in its existence. But to have an elevation that the food should become holy, so the misbar, the beer has to be done by a person. So in that way, person is higher than the food. But that's only the way it is in this world. But the way things are at the source, and this is the reason why food sustains a person, is Nifnei Melech Melech Israel, before there was a king by the Jewish people. Meaning to say before there was the concept of avodas habirurim, that humans have to come and refine and elevate the world, is that there was, before that, there was the world of Tohu, the world of chaos. And like it says in Parashat Vayishlach, that the kings of Esav, which represents the world of Tohu, the world of chaos, the source, at its source, the food where the vegetation comes from, comes before the kings of Israel. But when they were here, after they were created, there was death, there was negativity. They died and they lived and they were kings. There was separation. There wasn't a continuing of the energy, because it was a negative force. But at the end of the days, it comes first. And therefore its root, food, comes before the person. Like we learned many times, food gives life to the person. Why? Because it has in it from its root. It's connected to a high level of vitality, and therefore it can sustain a person. And a person needs to take that energy from the food. Because again, a person there's the thought process, and then there's the actual. In creation itself, vegetation came first. And we have the first, second, third, fourth, fifth day. Only in the middle of the 6 days, humans created. So first, a person comes last. Means in the source of energy, person comes last. Therefore, a person needs to eat the food. The food had to be there for the person to live. What would happen if it would be in the reverse? If Adam was created on the first day and the food came on the last day, he would starve for 5 days if he would survive. So the person needed to have the food ready for them. Adam and Chava needed the food ready for them. Like it's brought down, Hashem created the Adam and Chava like a person who's invited to a ready meal, because otherwise you have nothing to eat. So then in that way, food comes first. That's at its source. That's why a person sustains from the food. But the food itself, the way it is here in this world, while it has a life force, it can't change. It can't be elevated. And the elevation, that's in that way a person comes first. Adam is kedem, he comes first with the kavanah, because it's the person's ability to take the mundane and make it spiritual. So that's all in the week. Shabbos, so in the week, is the engaging of the food, and therefore the food has to have the birurim, has to have the elevation by humans. Shabbos, Shuzman, Aliyas Ha'ilim, but on Shabbos the worlds go up to its root. Then the food goes up to where it is in its source. And that's why the breads were breads that were cycled on the Shabbos. That's one of the 12 breads were changed every Shabbos. So on the 12 breads that means that the 12 breads that were in the base of Mikdash and the Mishkan and the tabernacle and the holy, and then right opposite the menorah and right outside the Oren was the table that had the 12 breads. So that represents the concept of the food of Shabbos. And the food of Shabbos is elevated. And therefore the food of Shabbos it's at its root. And at its root, it doesn't need fixing. So it's just the way it is at its root, and it's on a much higher level. And that's the idea. So this is the idea he says before. He started off to understand the idea of eating. So we have the difference between eating. He explains the difference between eating on Shabbos and eating in the week. Eating in the week is engagement, where a human, so to say, is higher than the food, and a person has the ability to elevate the food. On Shabbos, the food is at its root, and because the food is at its root, therefore it's a mitzvah just to eat food, because at its root, food is higher than a person. Food was created first. Now he goes into that's not just the difference; it's a difference also in. So that's a difference in Shabbos. It means it's the difference in Zman, the difference between the time of Shabbos and the time of the week. Now we're going to go the difference between the person themselves, the nefesh. There's 2 types of people that eat. It means there's a person in general that's a tzaddik, and the tzaddik is already beyond elevation, beyond birurim in themselves. The person has already, he or she, been refined to the level of tzaddik, and at the level of tzaddik, they're eating like a way of Shabbos. That's why it's a tzaddik is called Shabbos. So the Gemara says that. And a person who's a Beinani or a Rasha is eating in a way of a struggle, of challenge. So now he continues. The righteous person eats to the satisfaction of their soul, because everything's already elevated. They're already refined. They don't need this. There's no birurim. There's no fighting within themselves. There's 2 types of eating. So there's 2 times of eating, and there's in the nefesh, in the person, 2 types of people that are eating. A way of satisfaction. Why? Because all it is about the good, the positive. The second level is if the person is a Rasha, meaning anyone who's not a tzaddik. Rasha doesn't mean a bad person. A Rasha means a person who's engaged in the struggle. So bet in Rishayim, the stomach of the Rishayim is lacking. Because the soive nafshi, what does it mean a person eats, a tzaddik eats the satisfaction of their soul? So he says, Hu chayis hanefesh abal memayla. It's all about the spirit of the soul that's connected from above. There's no struggle below. And therefore, it's like a way of eating on Shabbos. So the tzaddik, when the tzaddik is eating, he or she is always eating in a madreg of Shabbos. Everything is already elevated. There's a connection that with the root of the food, with the root of the tzaddik. Better and showing why is the stomach of the wicked, meaning the wicked, someone who's not a tzaddik again. It's a voda of the Beinani of Tanya and the Rasha of Tanya. The Rishayim are living the way things are externally, the way the food comes down after the broken vessels. And they need, when they use the energy of the food, and they have to make choices. It means it's not just that the food itself has in it the positive and the negative. There's the energy also. It's the tzaddik always, any energy that the tzaddik takes in from eating food is a positive experience. The tzaddik takes in food, and the tzaddik is using energy only to serve Hashem. The person who's below a tzaddik, who struggles, could use that energy for something negative. If you're going to eat food and not serve Hashem with that, so you're bringing the food even lower than it is at a sort of say a parv, at a middle level, at a place that could go anywhere. You're bringing it to something negative. So therefore, he says, that's the way things are externally. But when they eat and they make the right choices, and it's not a guarantee that they will, is mivarim mihem, and therefore they could elevate. And there's chayil bala v'yike'enu. There's eating. This bala means swallowing, and also spitting out, because if the separation is within them themselves, the separation is also in the energy that they're eating, and therefore they're engaging in the food that has goods and bads in it. So they eat, they swallow, and they also have to spit out the negative. If you're eating the food the way it is in this world, a food has in it a pleasure, and in that pleasure, if you're going to use it for the negative, you're going to take an energy that's going to go towards negative things. Shushar Shaklipa, that starts the taiv itself. Now, again, we've learned before in Chassidus, in the Mammar of the Rebbe, there's nothing, the taiv, the fact that there's a pleasure in something itself is not a problem. It's when the pleasure is being applied to something negative. If a person is going to take a pleasure that they have and you apply to something negative, so therefore, that's why he calls it, it's a shayusha klipa, it's the root of klipa. Because it's not necessarily klipa right away. But if you're going to use the taiva for something bad, so then you're going to, it means a person who's able to take a taiva, something that's pleasurable, and to use it to elevate it to a holy experience, that's okay. And now when a person eats the food, so here we're talking about the same food. It's not that the food, it's not like the tzaddik is eating a different diet than the Rasha. And it's not the tzaddik eats chicken and the Rasha eats meat or fish or vegetables, whatever. Same food, but the food itself has two sides to it. Just like we said, there's the food on Shabbos and the food in the week. The tzaddik is connected to the food at its root. So even if he's eating the carrots or the food or the fish, whatever the food is, the vegetation or the animal, it's connected at the root of the food. But the Rasha himself and herself are not there. So if they're not there, so the parts of the food that they're approaching are also available. They can take the negative parts of the food. That's why every food has a pleasure. That's the root that something can go negative of klipos. And a person who's not refined eats the food, and becomes part of their being, part of their bloodstream, meaning part of their life force. That goes into the heart and to the brain, like we said before. And you use it for positive. So it's up to you. Are you going to use your brain power and your love for godliness and godly things, even in material things? I'm not talking about to be abstract from the world, but the way the world is a godly world. So it's an avodas Hashem, it's a service of God. And then you're taking what could have been negative, and it means from the other side, that there's always something on the negative side, and you're elevating it to holy. You made the choice. Then what does it mean that the stomach of the wicked are lacking? So not that it's lacking, that you're eating something less. It's lacking the negativity. The Rasha, because the Rasha is engaged in the food. See, the food, it's an amazing thing with the Alter. What's the Alter Rebbe saying over here? Right? He says, so to say that there's Shabbos and the weekday, we can understand. That Shabbos, the whole world, the physical world is not the same world. It may look like it's the same world, but Shabbos has at least the whole 10 utterances of creation gets elevated. And what is the 10 utterances? The existence of the creation. The world is created by the Asar Mamaris. And those utterances, like a person who utters goes out. Imagine you could take your words back. So humans can't take your words back, but God, like the Alter Rebbe says in Tanya, is never disconnected from his words. So the words, while the world is in existence because there's an unseen connection or unrecognized connection constantly between the utterance and the existence of the world. That's happening constantly. And that utterance, there's constantly a connection between, so to say, God that utters these utterances and the utterances themselves. And so therefore, in Shabbos, it's like it's going backwards. Imagine you push rewind, like in old movies, you can see the movie going backwards. The energy is going backwards. So therefore, you can see that, understand how the food that in this world was brought down, where there's the broken vessels, and therefore there's a corruption, so to say, in the food. So you can see why if you go backwards, the food gets elevated. But how does that work with humans? How could it be that the same food during the week also that you're gonna have? It's not talking about a time. It's not a time thing. That the same food for a tzaddik is absolute holiness, is the soiver nafshay, and for the wicked, so to say, the person who's out in the world struggling with worldly things, is not refined yet, not elevated. The level of tzaddik is in a way that techsa, that the food itself is different. So the food, so to say, is a reflection on you. It's like a mirror. If you are the tzaddik, so then you're engaging in the food like Shabbos. You're seeing you're connected to the food the way it is at its root. If you are a non-tzaddik, let's call it. So if you're a non-tzaddik, it's like a mirror. The food reflects you. So the food is like you. If you're struggling, the food is struggling. There's two parts of the food. And it's your choice to take that energy, make the right choices, then you're elevating the food. And then you're going to take away techsa, you're taking away, it's lacking the possibility for negative energy. And he says, so like we said before, the idea of, again, this is Torah Or. Torah Or is shorthand, meaning to say there's a lot of deep ideas that in other Mammarim would be explained very much at length, like these two concepts of the difference between, and also we have the third difference, not that he mentions it here in this Mammar, the idea of when the Mizbeach eats something and when the Kohanim eat something. And in the last week we talked about the angels, how the angels eat something, how would humans eat something. That's why Avram stood over the angels. So he says like this: when a person eats in the week, she is beer. So both the person is engaging in refinement, and the food has to be refined. So that's a comparison of the Rasha who's lacking, and therefore there's a lacking in the food. The food itself is in a level of struggle. Shabbos is like the eating of a tzaddik. Because the food is elevated at its root. There's no refinement. There's no refinement in food when there's no on Shabbos. That's why Shabbos beer is aser. Why? What does it mean? Shabbos beer is aser. On Shabbos, it's forbidden to separate things, right? Just like you're not allowed to take a fly out of your wine. You're not allowed to separate things on Shabbos. It's one of the 39 malachs of Shabbos. Why? Not just because you're not allowed, because there is no separation on Shabbos. Shabbos is beyond separation. When a person separates on Shabbos, he or she is doing a mundane thing on Shabbos. Shabbos, the world is elevated, so there's nothing to separate. We're turning to the next page, which is 4. Like the Zohar says, perish abatchem like Mammar. Perish means there's no leftovers on Shabbos. There's nothing to throw out. When you have to elevate from below up, meaning from below in the world and elevate it upwards, like it's like a weekday avoda. Not everything is holy. There's the separation. You have to separate the positive energy from the negative energy, and what's negative has to be thrown away. It's psalus, it's leftovers. The best part of the food goes to the heart and to the brain. And whatever is not able to be digested and be processed in the body goes down to the digestive system. And that's the separation. But Shabbos is the way it is from above down. Not that there's no elevation in the food. That's why it says doesn't say perish, doesn't say leftovers on Shabbos. How could there be something that has both good and bad. It started from the root of where things got good and bad together. What's that? In the tree of knowledge. The tree of knowledge was the tree of good and bad together. And like we learned in Parshas Bereshis, that's when it became part of the person. When a person ate from the tree, when Chav and Adam ate from the tree of knowledge, good and bad, we became good and bad. And therefore, our foods are connected. Like I said, the food reflects you. So if you're a person that's mixed in the tree of knowledge, that has good and bad, so the food is identical to that. So therefore, there's something to push away. But Shabbos is the way the world is beyond the world of the tree of knowledge, good and bad. Therefore, in this world, things are good and bad. It all started from when man ate from the tree of knowledge, good and bad. Because of that, a person is mixed good and bad. Of course, what's one person struggles is someone else doesn't struggle with. The good and bad is not an exact mix, not a replica on each person. Each person has the components of good and bad. And how it is played out in each individual, everyone knows what they struggle with. Some people have a lot of good. And then etc. And those have maybe less good or a different type of good. The mix of it is not equal, but the mix is there. And that's the mix. And therefore, the food, when it has to be elevated upwards, there's the tree of knowledge therefore the food, there's a level of food that has itself good and bad. And it reflects that the person who himself is still connected to the sin of the tree of knowledge. And each person, according to their avodah, has to separate and do avodah from the energy of the food to use the food properly in its elevation. So now he says there's more and bad, and there's different. Some people are good in certain things. Shabbos, that's all in the week. But in Shabbos, we reach the level of tainug, of pleasure, to the level of godliness of Yud Kei Vav Kei, the Ma'al Me'etzadas, beyond the tree of knowledge. The food gets elevated, the person gets elevated. That's why every person, it doesn't just say tzaddikim could eat on Shabbos. The whole creation gets elevated on Shabbos. So the person's struggle, people become more refined than Shabbos. The food gets more refined than Shabbos. The experience is more refined than Shabbos. It's all a Ma'al Me'etzadas. There's no bad on Shabbos. That's why Shabbos is like Gan Eden, the Garden of Eden. Rak B'Yom Tov, that's in Shabbos. And we have the week, which is the struggle, connected to the person who's struggling. Rak B'Yom Tov, what about the holidays? Chsiv, Perish Chageichem. But there is leftovers, there is discharge on the Chageichem, on the Chag, on the holiday. Why? There is still refinement. Where do we find refinement on Shabbos? The very fact that you could cook on Shabbos, on Yom Tov, it's permitted and sometimes encouraged to cook fresh food on Yom Tov itself. So the cooking itself is refinement. Why? Because you're making food that was inedible or not edible. It was inedible to the way you would like it, to making it in a way that's pleasurable to you, right? If you cook a piece of meat, you can't eat the meat before it's cooked. That's a separation. You're elevating the food. You're changing the food. So we see on Yom Tov, a person has the ability to do birur, a type of refinement. Kafia, like you're allowed to bake or bishul or cook. You're not allowed to go out to the field and cut the wheat or plant. But there's a level of refinement on Yom Tov. Because there's some sort of refinement, even though not on the level of the week allowed on Yom Tov. Therefore, there has to be some sort of the food is not 100% quality as it is on Shabbos spiritually. And therefore, he says, Yesh by beer there's a little refinement. And therefore, if there's ever refinement, there's a discharge. And when you refine, by definition, you're refining something from something else. And when you separate them, so then the good part is with you and the bad part has to be sent away. So how do you fix it in avoda? How does a person fix the psoilus, the leftovers on Yom Tov? So it says the mechte l'miskeni. What does that mean? So he says in 13, the sameach aniyim. So the mechte is to satisfy the miskeni, to someone who's a misken. A misken means someone who's unfortunate, which means a poor person. Why? What does it mean to make a person who's not happy? What is the idea to be happy? True happiness is when everyone's equally happy. Like it says, a person on Yom Tov has to be happy. Ata, you have to be happy, not just you. V'halevi, v'hager, everyone, you have to make sure everyone's happy. The Levite has to be happy, the convert has to be happy, anyone who doesn't have happiness. The Shulchan Aruch has very strong language about a person who does a private moment at Yom Tov that says, Yom Tov is for me to be happy. Me and my family are going to have good food to eat, but I'm not going to consider myself. I'm not going to consider other people. The Shulchan Aruch has very strong language about that person. So why is the simcha? Why is simcha the time of Yom Tov? It's very important to have simcha, meaning to make others happy. And we don't find this by Shabbos, he's going to say, because simcha is a way of sweetening the judgment. And then the judgment is when there's something negative, because the food itself is not 100% positive. Like we said, Yom Tov has birur, has separation. So how do we separate it? How do we do it? By simcha. When you infuse simcha, means when a person. That's why specifically the simcha is about meals, foods. When you have food, so what are you permitted to do? You've got to cook on Yom Tov. So if you're cooking on Yom Tov, you have to make sure that other people are taking joy in your cooking. So that rectifies the cooking component, the birur component, the separation component, elevating the part that there's something negative, that the negative shouldn't have a force on you and shouldn't take a hold of you. How do you sweeten the judgment of that? Is by making other people happy. Everyone has to be happy. You can't exclude anyone. Everyone has to be happy. Like it says, it's known. When a person is in a real time of simcha in their life, one of a person who's happy alone, that's not happiness. So when you're happy, you want to be with other people to be happy. And that sweetens the judgment. So now Alter Rebbe explains, why does simcha have the power to sweeten judgment? What sweeten judgment mean? Judgment is that the eye that judges something, judges a situation, like we learned last week in the Mammar, that the people of Stone judged. When a person judges something, so you're judging it, it's not evil. Judgment's not evil. Judgment is according to what you deserve, right? What's a judge say? This person deserves it or not. So how do you get out of, how do you sweeten that kind of attitude of judgment? Is because when you equalize, when you make everyone happy and you're not judging the people, I'm going to only make this person happy, or I only want to have this person at my table, I don't want that person at my table, I'm not interested in helping another person, right? When you have no limitations in who you want to make happy, so therefore it's an end. That's why this is the power of simcha, and that's what real simcha is. He says simcha is shem Shabbos kulam, everyone's equal. You don't look at someone better than the next, and if you have that attitude, that's real simcha. So then that's why it sweetens the judgment, because judgment is when you're judging the situation. So everything's equal. So there's no place for judgment now. If a person doesn't give to a poor person, to a person that is not in that is in a situation of a misken, of unfortunate, you have no way to sweeten your judgment, and there's a negative force on Yom Tov. Perish, and the leftover stays. So Hashem says that what's the punishment? The punishment is measurement for measurement. Perish. Right? It's brought down. What happens? The leftovers is what you get. Because why? Because you created leftovers. If you create leftovers by not sweetening the judgment, so then you end up getting leftovers. What happens to leftovers is 5%. So you're down to 5% from 100. From now, you lose 95%. Because by you not making other people happy, you cause that there should be leftovers in the world. Because you didn't sweeten the dinim. That's only on Yom Tov. So on Yom Tov, because there is a little bit of negative force, your job is to get rid of the negative force. And how do you get rid of the negative force? That's the eye of judgment, is by not judging and having everyone equal. And if you're looking to make everyone equally happy, so then there's no judgment. But if you're not going to do that, then the state remains judgment, and the judgment goes back to you. That's all the Yom Tov. That's the holiday. But in the week on the Shabbos, even if a person doesn't necessarily give to the people that are unfortunate, it's not as bad. The Rebbe says, it doesn't say it's a good thing, obviously, but it's not as bad. Shabbos ain't perish klal, because it's not like this. See, the difference is like this: there's automatic negative forces on Yom Tov because there's a permissible to cook, and therefore there's birur, there's something that has to be separated. So you have an obligation to get rid of that. On Shabbos, there's nothing there. So it's not like the punishment is less because it's not that something negative is remaining. There's no negative. So therefore, the consequences of not being as kind on Shabbos is less than the consequences than if it were on Yom Tov. That's why people have guests on Yom Tov. It's much more emphasis of having guests on Yom Tov more than you see on Shabbos. And he says, says this amshacha to bring down positive energy is in two ways: to double and to extend. Pirsh klisha, yamshach is yud and vavin. That idea that a yud becomes a vav, meaning a yud is the every vav or long vav, nun has a yud on top and just continues downwards. It's a line, right? The beginning of the line is the yud. So the idea is to extend an energy. So you have the yud of Hashem's name, bring it down. So yud in vavin, shem yud nasa vav, a yud becomes a vav. Shayud atzmi nimshach v'nasa vav, that yud itself becomes a vav. The yud is the way things are in a small way, right? It starts off as a dot, and your job is to expand that. The yud itself becomes expanded because the yud itself has no space. So here he's saying in the difference. He's going to go into the difference between. We said before that the silent hey is the continuation of the hey, but a hey has a space, right? The hey has a space. So if a hey has a space, it's not the dimensions is different. So in order for you to expand what that is, in order for you to expand a hey is for you to it has to be in three dimensional, right? So it has to go. It expands the other way. So he says like this. So the yud itself becomes a vav because the yud itself has no space, and the no space becomes a space. But the hey itself, already has a space. It's a square. Therefore, there's no way to expand the hay. If the hay is already a space, means in avoida, he's not explaining it here, but in avoida we could say this: bittul, when a person has self-nullification, which is represented by the yud, so you could from the nothingness come something, because you haven't created anything yet. So there's nothing that's contrary to what you're trying to do. Because you had bittul, therefore you're limitless in what you can accomplish, because you have no definition yet, and therefore the yud itself could become a vav. But if hey is already yesh something, like hey is bina, yesh misha ayev, you already love, so you're already defined. You can't come from something to something else. Yesh mi yesh. So how does it work? If you already have the space of who you are, and you don't have it's not about the bittul so much. You already have a definition. So what are you going to do with the hey? The hey is already there. It says avlahei she spashes already has space. You're already expanding yourself. You're already defining yourself in a broad and length. So you're not allowing for the way the hay is above, which is much higher and much more refined than your definition, because you already defined yourself. You already boxed yourself into your personality. So how do you bring the hay down? There has to be a second hay. That's why the first hay. That there's the silent hay in the hay. That's why the way you pronounce hay is to say hey, is you hear silent hey. And the idea is only that the hay, which was concealed before because it wasn't revealed, is you're trying to reveal it. That's a big chiddush. To reveal the hidden hay in the hay itself is a much larger chiddush than the expansion of a yud into vav. That's the doubling. That's the idea of the double hay. So, but the Alter Rebbe is basically saying, if I'm understanding it correctly, and that's the more the avoid of the Baal Tshuva, the avoid of the Rasha, the avoid of the person who's already that's eating. So, in order, there's much stronger avoid that you can't just connect to expand to something that was to take a small yud and to bring more light into the world. You have to kind of within your character that you already have a character, so you have already the definition of who you are. You know your struggles, and in that to turn that around and to make that into holy, that's a big avoida. To turn the silent hay, the hidden hay, and make that your reality. That's a transformation, not an extension, not an expansion, but a transformation. That's all the way things are that we're getting from the 12 breads today in the world. The way is that there's Shabbos and there's the hidden foods. That's all now. But in time of Mashiach, we're going to be revealed to us the reason, what's behind. What's the real reason behind the 12 loaves. It won't have to have a silent and revealed hay. Why? Because the hay, the way it is above, will be down here in this world. Means when you don't know the reason for something. So there's the hidden and there's the revealed. The revealed is I see the 12 loaves. What's the reason behind the 12 loaves? That's a time, that's the reason behind it that we don't understand. That's the hidden hay, because again, it's very hard to transform a revealed hay into a hidden hay, or to reveal the hidden hay in the revealed hay. But in time Mashiach, he says we're gonna have the background story of everything. Yigal on time, we're gonna have the reason. So then, like it says, everything's gonna be one. It's gonna be such an elevation in the world that the reality and the beyond reality is going to be all in a way of revealed. And this is a complicated Mammar, but the concept of it is the avodas Hashem we have in our avodah here, and to be aware of the silent hay that's within us, at least that, to know that there's a silent hay behind our reality that's in the same space, so to say, but it's there, and you have to try to reveal it to the best you can, and try to transform yourself to the best you can. Till the days of Mashiach, B'karav Mamish. All right, Shkoyach Reb Shimon, and those who are on YouTube, Laila Tov, take care.